My wife sent money to her ex using our business account, but I owned the records. I never thought I'd be telling this story at 66 years old. After 4 decades of marriage, you think you know someone. You think you've weathered every storm together. But sometimes, the person sleeping next to you every night is planning the perfect betrayal. My name is Robert, and this is the story of how my wife Margaret tried to steal from our business to fund her secret relationship with her ex-husband. What she didn't know was that I kept meticulous records of everything. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in my home office in our suburban Chicago house, going through the monthly statements for our small accounting firm. Margaret and I had built the business together over 25 years. She handled client relations while I managed the books and financial planning. We were a team, or so I thought. I was reviewing our business checking account when I noticed something odd. A wire transfer for $15,000 to someone named David Kellerman. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't place it immediately. Margaret had handled this transaction according to the authorization's signature on file. "Honey," I called out to Margaret, who was in the kitchen preparing lunch, "can you come here for a minute?" She walked into my office, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 62, Margaret still had the same auburn hair she'd had when we met, though now it came from a bottle. She was wearing her favorite blue cardigan and had that slightly nervous smile she got when she was hiding something. "What's up, Rob?" she asked, but I noticed her eyes quickly dart to the computer screen. "This wire transfer to David Kellerman, $15,000. What was this for?" The color drained from her face. "Oh, that. It was for the Henderson account. You know, the restaurant chain. We had to make a payment to their former contractor." I frowned. "David Kellerman. I don't remember any contractor by that name on the Henderson account." "Well, you don't handle all the client details anymore," she said, her voice getting slightly defensive. "I've been taking care of more of the day-to-day operations." Something in her tone bothered me. In 25 years of business, Margaret had never made a major financial decision without discussing it with me first. $15,000 wasn't pocket change, even for our successful firm. "Margaret, I need to see the paperwork for this transaction. Client authorization, contract details, everything." She shifted uncomfortably. I'll have to dig through the files. It might take me a while to find everything." "That's fine, I'll wait." She left the office and I heard her moving around in the filing room. While she was gone, I did what any good accountant would do. I started digging deeper. I pulled up our bank records for the past 6 months and began looking for any other unusual transactions. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, there had been 7 transfers to David Kellerman, ranging from $5,000 to $20,000 each. The total was over $90,000. All of them had been authorized by Margaret, and all of them were categorized as business expenses or contractor payments. But here's the thing, I knew our business inside and out. I knew every client, every contractor, every vendor. We didn't have $90,000 in contractor payments that I didn't know about. I sat back in my chair, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. David Kellerman. David Kellerman. Where had I heard that name? Then it hit me like a freight train. David Kellerman was Margaret's ex-husband, her first husband before we met, the one she'd told me had been a mistake from her youth, the one she claimed she hadn't spoken to in over 40 years. My hands were shaking as I pulled up more records. I started going back further, month by month, looking for any sign of when this had started. The earliest transaction I could find was from 8 months ago. A $5,000 transfer, also to David Kellerman. Margaret returned to the office with a manila folder, but she looked pale and nervous. "I found some of the paperwork," she said, setting the folder down on my desk. "But I'm still missing some pieces." I opened the folder. Inside were generic contractor agreement forms, hastily filled out and backdated. The handwriting was Margaret's, but the signatures looked forged. The paperwork was clearly fabricated. "Margaret," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, "I need you to tell me the truth. Who is David Kellerman?" She froze. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, marking the seconds of our 40-year marriage falling apart. I don't know what you mean," she whispered. "Margaret, I found nearly $100,000 in transfers to David Kellerman over the past 8 months. These contractor agreements are fake, the signatures are forged, and I think David Kellerman is your ex-husband." The dish towel fell from her hands. She sank into the chair across from my desk, and I watched 40 years of marriage crumble in real time. How did you know?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I keep records of everything, Margaret. Every transaction, every client, every penny that goes in and out of this business. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $100,000? She started crying then, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught. "It's not what you think," she said. "David contacted me last year. He was in trouble, financial trouble. He needed help, and he didn't have anyone else to turn to. So you decided to steal from our business to help him." "It wasn't stealing, it was just temporary. I was going to pay it back." "With what money, Margaret? And why didn't you tell me? Why the fake paperwork? Why the lies?" She couldn't answer. She just sat there crying, and I realized that the woman I'd been married to for 40 years was a stranger. "Are you having an affair with him?" I asked. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Margaret's sobs stopped abruptly. We reconnected," she said finally. "We started talking and old feelings came back. But it's not what you think. We haven't been physical. But you've been sending him our money, our business money that we earned together, that we need for our retirement. I thought I could handle it myself. I thought I could help him and then everything would go back to normal." "Normal? Margaret, you've been lying to me for 8 months. You've been stealing from our business. You've been having an emotional affair with your ex-husband. How is any of this normal?" I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, it was a beautiful spring day. The dogwood tree in our front yard was in full bloom, the same tree we'd planted together 20 years ago when we bought this house. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. "I need to know everything," I said, turning back to her. "How did he contact you? How long have you been talking? Where is he now? How much money does he still owe you?" Margaret wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He found me on Facebook about a year ago. He said he was living in Florida, that he'd been thinking about me. We started messaging, then talking on the phone. He told me about his problems. His business failed. He lost his house. He had medical bills." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to help. He was my first love, Rob. We were married for 3 years when we were young. I felt like I owed him something." "You owed him nothing. You were divorced. You moved on. You married me." I know. But when someone you once loved is in trouble, you don't steal from your current husband to help them." The anger in my voice surprised both of us. In 40 years of marriage, I'd rarely raised my voice to Margaret. But then again, she'd never stolen from me before. "Where is he now?" I asked. He's in Tampa. He rented the apartment with some of the money I sent him. He's trying to start a new business. With our money. I was going to tell you eventually. I just needed time to figure out how to handle it." "Handle it? Margaret, you've stolen nearly $100,000 from our business. You've been lying to me for 8 months. You've been having an affair, emotional or otherwise, with your ex-husband. There's no handling this. There's only the consequences." I walked back to my desk and sat down. My hands were steadier now, my mind clearer. The shock was wearing off, replaced by cold, hard determination. "I want his address," I said. "I want his phone number. I want copies of all your communications with him. And I want to know exactly how much money you've sent him. Rob, please, can't we work this out between us?" "Work it out? Margaret, you've destroyed our marriage. You've stolen from our business. You've put our retirement at risk. There's nothing to work out." She reached across the desk and tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. "I love you, Rob. I've loved you for 40 years. This thing with David, it's not real. It's just old feelings, old memories. You're my husband. You're my life. If I was your life, you wouldn't have stolen from me to help another man. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can get the money back. We can make this right." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman I didn't recognize. The Margaret I'd married was honest, trustworthy, someone who would never lie to me about anything, let alone steal from our business. This woman sitting across from me was a stranger. "I need you to pack a bag," I said quietly. "What?" "I need you to pack a bag and leave. Go stay with your sister. Go to a hotel. I don't care. But I can't have you in this house right now." "Rob, please, don't do this. We can work through this." "No, we can't. You've been lying to me for 8 months. You've been stealing from our business. You've been having an affair with your ex-husband. I can't trust you anymore." "It wasn't an affair. We never met in person. We just talked on the phone and sent messages. You sent him $100,000 of our money. You lied to me every single day for 8 months. You forged documents. If that's not an affair, what is it?" She had no answer for that. "I want his contact information," I said again. "All of it. And I want it now." With shaking hands, Margaret took out her phone and started writing down information on a piece of paper. David Kellerman's address in Tampa, his phone number, his email address. "Please don't contact him," she said as she handed me the paper. "He doesn't know that you know. He thinks the money is coming from my personal account." "Oh, I'm definitely going to contact him. But not the way you think." "What do you mean?" I looked at her one last time, this woman who'd been my partner for 40 years, who'd helped me build a business and a life, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my fears. Now she was just someone who'd stolen from me. "I mean, I'm going to get our money back, all of it, and then I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Margaret packed her bags that afternoon. She kept trying to talk to me, to explain, to apologize, but I was done listening. I helped her load her suitcase into her car and watched as she drove away from the house we'd shared for 20 years. Then I went back to my office and got to work. The first thing I did was call our business attorney, Jim Morrison. Jim had been handling our legal affairs for 15 years, and I trusted him completely. "Jim, it's Rob. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. It's urgent." "What's going on?" "I'll explain everything when I see you, but I need you to clear your schedule. This is going to take some time." The next morning, I drove to Jim's office in downtown Chicago. It was a beautiful spring day, but I felt like I was driving through a fog. Everything seemed surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Jim's office was on the 40th floor of a glass tower with a view of Lake Michigan. He was a tall, thin man with silver hair and kind eyes. He'd been through his own divorce 10 years earlier, so I knew he'd understand what I was going through. "Rob, you look terrible," he said as I sat down across from his desk. "What's happened?" I told him everything. The wire transfers, the fake paperwork, the ex-husband in Florida, the lies, the betrayal. Jim listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Jesus, Rob," he said when I finished. "I'm so sorry. This is pretty serious." "I know. That's why I'm here. I want to know what my options are." "Well, first of all, you need to understand that this is likely embezzlement. Margaret has stolen money from your business, used forged documents, and lied to you about it. This could be criminal." "I don't want to press criminal charges, not yet anyway. I just want my money back." "That's understandable, but you need to protect yourself. What if she's sent more money that you haven't found yet? What if she does it again?" "She can't. As of yesterday, I've removed her from all of our business accounts. She no longer has access to any of our money." "Good. That's smart. Now, let's talk about your options." Jim explained that I could pursue civil litigation against both Margaret and David Kellerman. Since Margaret had used our business funds for personal purposes, and since David had received money that wasn't rightfully his, I could sue both of them for the full amount, plus damages. But here's the thing, Rob. Even if we win, that doesn't mean we can collect. If David Kellerman doesn't have any assets, if he's really as broke as Margaret says he is, then getting a judgment against him might be worthless. So what do you suggest? I suggest we start with a demand letter. We contact David Kellerman directly, tell him we know about the money and demand that he return it immediately. We give him a deadline, say 30 days, and if he doesn't comply, then we file suit. What about Margaret? That's more complicated. She's your wife and she's a co-owner of the business. Legally, she had the authority to make those wire transfers, even if she was using fraudulent documentation. but morally and ethically, she's clearly in the wrong. So she might not face any legal consequences. She could, but it would be harder to prove. The easier target is David Kellerman. He received money that wasn't his, and he has no legitimate claim to it. I thought about that for a moment. Part of me wanted Margaret to face consequences for what she'd done, but another part of me just wanted my money back and wanted this whole nightmare to be over. Let's start with the demand letter to David Kellerman, I said. See if we can resolve this without going to court. I'll draft something today and send it to you for review. In the meantime, I want you to document everything. Every transaction, every piece of communication between Margaret and David that you can find, every forged document. We need to build a complete record of what happened. I spent the next 3 days going through every piece of paper in our office, every email, every phone record I could access. What I found was even worse than I'd thought. Margaret had been more careful than I'd given her credit for. She'd used our business email system to communicate with David, but she'd been deleting the emails after sending them. However, she'd forgotten that our email system automatically backed up everything to a server. I found hundreds of emails between Margaret and David, dating back over a year. The early emails were innocent enough, old friends catching up, sharing memories of their brief marriage 40 years ago. But as the months went on, the tone became more intimate, more romantic. David had been very clever in how he'd asked for money. He never directly asked for it. Instead, he would share his problems, his fears, his struggles. He would tell Margaret about his failed business, his medical bills, his fear of being homeless. He would talk about how much he missed the good old days when they were young and in love. Margaret, for her part, had been completely taken in. Her emails to him were full of sympathy, affection, and promises to help. She told him how much she'd missed him, how she'd often wondered what would have happened if they'd stayed together. She told him about her marriage to me, but in a way that made it sound like she'd settled for security rather than love. Reading those emails felt like being stabbed in the heart, over and over again. This woman who'd been my partner for 40 years, who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, who'd shared my bed and my life and my dreams, had been telling another man that she'd settled for me. But the emails also gave me something else. Evidence. Clear, undeniable evidence of what had happened and why. Jim's demand letter to David Kellerman was sent on a Thursday. It was professional but firm, detailing exactly how much money he'd received and demanding that it be returned within 30 days. We sent it certified mail to his address in Tampa. David's response came back within a week, but not in the way I expected. Instead of responding to Jim, David called Margaret directly. She in turn called me. "Rob, please, you have to stop this," she said. She was crying again. "David is terrified. He thinks you're going to have him arrested." "Maybe I will. He doesn't have the money anymore. He used it to pay his debts, to get back on his feet. He can't just give it back. Then he shouldn't have taken it in the first place. Please, Rob, I'm begging you, don't destroy his life over this. He destroyed his own life and yours and mine. Can't we work out some kind of payment plan? He can pay it back a little at a time." "How much can he pay?" "I don't know. Maybe $500 a month?" I did the math quickly. At $500 a month, it would take him nearly 20 years to pay back what he'd stolen from us. I'd be dead before I saw all of my money again. "That's not acceptable," I said. "Then what is acceptable?" "I want it all back, every penny, within 30 days. "That's impossible. Then he should have thought about that before he took my money." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "What if I could get some of it back? What if I could come up with part of the money myself?" "How?" "I have some savings, some investments. I could liquidate them." "Margaret, those are your savings, your retirement money." "I know, but I caused this problem. I should be the one to fix it." I thought about that. Margaret did have her own savings account, her own retirement investments. She'd been careful with money throughout our marriage, always saving for the future. If she liquidated everything, she might be able to come up with $40,000 or $50,000. "How much could you get?" I asked. "Maybe 40,000, maybe a little more. That still leaves 50,000 that David owes us." "I know, but it's something." "Margaret, if you give me $40,000 and David gives me $50,000, then we're even on the money. But we're not even on the marriage. I know. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't know if I can trust you again. I understand. But I have to try to make this right. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret liquidated her savings and investments. She brought me a cashier's check for $42,000. It was everything she had, her entire financial safety net. Meanwhile, Jim was working on David Kellerman. The demand letter had gotten his attention, but he was still claiming he couldn't pay. Jim had hired a private investigator to look into David's finances, and what we found was interesting. David Kellerman wasn't as broke as he'd claimed to be. He had assets, a small condo in Tampa that he'd bought with Margaret's money, a car, some investments. He also had a job, a steady job with a decent salary. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't destitute either. The private investigator also found something else. David had a girlfriend, a woman named Linda, who lived with him in the condo he'd bought with my money. The touching love letters he'd been sending to Margaret, the promises of renewed romance, the claims that she was the only woman he'd ever truly loved. It was all lies. I printed out the investigator's report and drove to my sister-in-law's house, where Margaret was staying. I knocked on the door, and Margaret answered. "Rob, what are you doing here?" "I need to show you something." We sat at the kitchen table, and I spread out the investigator's report. Photographs of David and Linda together, financial records showing David's assets, employment records showing his steady income. Margaret stared at the photographs for a long time. They showed David and Linda at a restaurant laughing and holding hands. They were clearly a couple, clearly happy together. "He lied to me," she said finally. "Yes, he did. He told me he was alone. He told me he'd never gotten over losing me. He told you what you wanted to hear so you'd keep sending him money." Margaret started crying again, but these were different tears. These were tears of anger, of betrayal, of realization that she'd been played for a fool. "I'm such an idiot," she said. "You made a mistake, a big mistake, but you're not an idiot. I threw away our marriage for a man who was lying to me." "Yes, you did. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her sitting there, this woman who'd been my partner for 40 years, who'd helped me build a life and a business, who'd shared my joys and my sorrows. She looked older than her 62 years, worn down by guilt and regret. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I want to, but I don't know if I can. What happens now? Now we get our money back, all of it." Armed with the investigator's report, Jim filed a lawsuit against David Kellerman. We weren't just asking for the money back. We were asking for damages, interest, and attorney fees. We also filed a lien against his condo, which meant he couldn't sell it without paying us first. David's response was swift and panicked. Within a week of being served with the lawsuit, he called Jim's office and agreed to a settlement. He would pay back the full $50,000 plus $20,000 in damages and attorney fees within 60 days. The money came back in 2 installments. David had to take out a loan against his condo to pay us, which meant he and Linda would be making payments for years to come. But that wasn't my problem. When the final payment cleared, I had recovered every penny that had been stolen from our business, plus damages. Margaret's $42,000 was still sitting in my account, money I hadn't asked for but couldn't bring myself to give back. Margaret moved back into our house in May, 3 months after the whole ordeal had started. We were sleeping in separate bedrooms, eating meals at different times, living like polite strangers. "I know you don't trust me," she said one evening as we sat in the living room watching television. "I know I destroyed that, but I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back." "What does that mean?" "It means I'll sign over my share of the business to you. It means I'll give you access to all of my accounts, all of my communications. It means I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want me to do." "Margaret, I don't want to control you. I never wanted to control you. I just wanted to trust you." "I know, and I betrayed that trust. But people make mistakes, Rob. Even after 40 years of marriage, people make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose to lie to me. You chose to steal from our business. You chose to have an affair with your ex-husband. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices." "You're right. They were choices, bad choices, but I'm making different choices now." "How do I know that? How do I know you won't do this again?" "Because I lost everything. I lost my savings, I lost your trust, I almost lost you. I learned what happens when I make bad choices. I looked at her sitting there on the couch, this woman who'd been my partner for 40 years. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by what she'd done and what she'd lost. I don't know if I can get past this, I said. I know, but I'm going to try to help you. I'm going to try to show you that I'm still the woman you married, that I'm still worthy of your love. Margaret, I never stopped loving you. That's what makes this so hard. If I didn't love you, I could just walk away. But I do love you, and that makes the betrayal hurt even more. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We sat in silence for a while, watching the television without really seeing it. Outside, the Chicago summer was in full swing. The dogwood tree in our front yard was heavy with green leaves, and the neighborhood kids were playing in their yards. What happens now? Margaret asked. I don't know. I guess we try to figure out if we can rebuild what you broke. Can we? I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. She reached over and took my hand. For the first time in months, I didn't pull away. I'm willing to try, she said. It's been 6 months since that conversation. Margaret and I are still together, still trying to rebuild our marriage. We're going to counseling twice a week, learning how to communicate again, learning how to trust again. It's hard work, harder than anything we've ever done together. Margaret kept her promise. She signed over her share of the business to me, gave me access to all of her accounts, and cut off all contact with David Kellerman. She also got a job working for another accounting firm, giving us some separation between our personal and professional lives. The $42,000 she gave me is still sitting in a separate account. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Part of me wants to give it back to her, to help her rebuild her retirement savings. Another part of me thinks she should face the consequences of her choices. Do I trust her completely? No, not yet. But I trust her more than I did 6 months ago. Do I think she'll ever betray me again? I don't know, but I know she understands the consequences now in a way she didn't before. Our marriage is different now. We're more careful with each other, more aware of the fragility of trust. We talk more than we used to, share more than we used to. In some ways, we're closer than we've been in years. But there's also a sadness there, a knowledge that something has been lost that can never be fully recovered. The easy trust we once had is gone, replaced by something more complicated, more fragile. I think about David Kellerman sometimes, wonder if he learned anything from this experience. Probably not. Men like him rarely do. They move on to the next victim, the next woman who'll believe their lies and send them money. But that's not my problem anymore. My problem is figuring out how to love someone who betrayed me, how to trust someone who lied to me, how to rebuild a marriage that was nearly destroyed by greed and deception. Some days are better than others. Some days I look at Margaret and see the woman I married 40 years ago, the woman I built a life with. Other days I see the woman who stole from me, who lied to me, who chose another man over me. But I'm still here. We're still here. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any marriage really is. Two people choosing to stay together despite their flaws, despite their mistakes, despite the ways they've hurt each other. I kept meticulous records of everything that happened, just like I always do. Every email, every bank statement, every piece of evidence. Not because I'm planning to use it against Margaret, but because I'm an accountant. It's what I do. I keep records. And sometimes when I'm sitting in my office late at night, going through the files, I think about how different things might have been if Margaret had just been honest with me from the beginning. If she'd told me about David's problems, if she'd asked me to help him, if she'd been truthful about her feelings, would I have been angry? Yes. Would I have been hurt? Probably. But would I have helped? I don't know. Maybe. If she'd been honest, if she'd trusted me enough to tell me the truth, maybe we could have found a way to help David without destroying our marriage. But she didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. She thought she could handle it herself, thought she could lie to me and steal from our business and I'd never find out. She was wrong, because I keep records of everything, and in the end that's what saved us. Not love, not trust, not 40 years of marriage. Records, numbers, facts. The truth always comes out in the numbers, always. Margaret learned that lesson the hard way. David Kellerman learned it too. And now, 6 months later, we're all living with the consequences of their choices. But we're living. We're still here. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.